We're going to have a look at how to solder a wire. I'm going to show you 3 different ways of making effective solder joints. First, we need a soldering iron. Just picked this up, never used it, got it off of Amazon. It was under 30 bucks. I'll provide a link for you in case you want to pick one up. This is an 80-watt soldering iron, adjustable tips, which is kind of handy. So we can unscrew that there. This pops off, tip comes off. Comes with a few different tips we can use. We're just going to stick with the main round one today. Comes with some solder. When you're using solder for any type of small automotive marine wiring, you want to look for something that's within the 1 or 0.8 of a millimeter range. If you get real small, it's good for finer wire, but you'd use a lot of it on the thick wires, and too big, and it's really hard to make a nice solder on a small piece of wire. We also have a tiny little sponge. We've got a stand for our soldering iron when it gets hot. And it looks like we've got a little bit of soldering paste in there too. Okay, I'm going to plug this thing in. Alright, the soldering iron is plugged in and it's turned on. First thing we want to do on a brand new soldering iron is make sure that the tip is tinned. And what that means is you take a little bit of solder and you just apply it right to the tip. And that'll help prevent any type of oxidation on there. If you want to clean the tip, you can use this sponge. It does not need to be soaked in water, just lightly spritzed. And a very quick back and forth on it. You don't want to just jam the soldering iron into it or you're going to oxidize that tip and it won't solder as well. We're using 16 gauge wire, and the tools that we're going to need aside from our soldering iron are some wire strippers. So when we cut our wire, I've got this cutting portion, or I could use the cutters on a pair of needle nose, a pair of side cutters, cutters on a crimper. I have 16 gauge wire, so I'm going to take a look at the little chart on my strippers, and sometimes you'll have 2 of them, sometimes it'll just be 1, and they'll say solid wire or stranded wire. Automotive marine applications, we have stranded wire. A solid wire would be a single piece. That would be more so for your home applications or electronics. So I'm going to line up my 16 gauge. I'm going to strip about 1 inch of insulation off, squeeze, and then release the squeeze and pull. And if we've done this correctly, we won't have any copper from the wire left over in our insulation. And now I'm going to do the same thing on my other piece here. If you have to twist, you're using poor quality wire strippers, get rid of them, get a new pair. So the first solder joint I'm going to show you is called the Western Union splice. And basically what we do there, just spread out our wires a little bit. We're going to push them together and then twist. And when we're done twisting those, the bare part of the wire should be equal to or less than the diameter of the insulated part. And that'll lead to a nice clean solder. I'm going to place my wire on top of the iron, not below it, not on the tip. That'll give me the best contact to warm it up. Give it a touch of time to warm up. And then I should be able to melt my solder right into the wire, just like that. And then we know that it has a good joint. We want it to just meld right in so I can see the wire through the solder. That looks pretty good. If we got too much solder on it, it would bend underneath the insulation. So I got that a little warmer than I needed to, but I don't have too much solder on that one. So that is a solid Western Union splice that is soldered together. Next up, let's take a look at an even simpler way to solder these 2 pieces together. Okay, now I'm going to twist my wire. Twist this end as well. And then we can twist these 2 together. It's not as clean as a Western Union splice, but you can still make a good solid connection there. And you can have a good solidly soldered piece of wire. So we'll let that heat up. Solder goes in. And we have a nice, clean, strong solder joint there. And we'll test it again. And I got just a touch too much solder on that one there. Okay, let's take a look at our third type of solder joint. I'm going to go about 1/2 inch. I'll show you why here in a sec. So for this one, I am going to use a butt connector. And you'll notice that I have a 16 to 14 gauge, so that matches up with my 16 gauge wire. I am going to twist my wires, and before I put them into that butt connector, I'm going to solder the end. This is called tinning the end. So what we do here is we heat up the end, get a touch of solder into it, and the purpose of doing this is that it is going to make it much easier to solder this wire into that butt connector. There we go. So this is a crimp and solder. So I put one end in. Now most wire strippers will have a place on them to crimp. You're going to get a stronger crimp with a tool like this with crimpers. These ones I've had around for a little while. And we just insert into the end there and squeeze. Do the same thing on the other side. Insert and squeeze. Now this is technically strong enough, but I want to make this a forever joint. I want that thing to last forever and ever and ever and ever. So we're going to heat that up and do the same exact thing. Now I'm applying heat to the wire as well as heat to the butt connector. So I want them both to be hot so that the solder joins them together. And just a little bit there is probably more than enough. Do the same thing on this side. And remember, we already tinned it, so there's a fair bit of solder in there. And there you have it. A very strong butt-connected joint. Thanks for watching. Let me know what else you want to learn how to do. Have a good one.